Peace, peace. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Two Faced Gemini. I am Jasir Bay. And as you can guess, I'm a Gemini, right? And the reason why I call this podcast Two Faced Gemini is because I want to get rid of the stigma, or at least let people know that the whole stigma of Geminis being two faced is only partially true, right? And being a Gemini, I don't want to make this podcast all about astrology, but I'm interested in astrology. I like it. There's some validity there. So, but it's not something that you have to believe in order for you to enjoy this, because we're going to talk about different things. But being that I am a Gemini, and if you ever had an experience with a Gemini, you can experience the flakiness of a Gemini sometimes, right? We will flake on you at times when we just don't feel like doing something, right? Because our moods can just change just like that. We'll say we'll go somewhere, then at the last second, and be like, I'm not going, right? And not even tell you that we're not going. Just don't show up. You'll get the message, right? Or you get involved with somebody, you show a lot of interest in them. I mean, you can make it seem like this person means the world to you, and when you finally get them, you're like, you know, I don't feel like I don't feel like it no more. Like I'm not interested in them. It's kind of crazy. It's like when they pose a lot of interest in you, then that's when you like pull away. Doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it happens, right? When you start to really get to know somebody or know them a lot more. It's like the whole thrill of the chase kind of thing, right? It's like it's fun to chase after somebody. Then when you get them, you're like, oh, now I don't want them, right? I know people experience that, and that's why I get that from females that, oh, Gemini, they're two faced, whenever they found out I'm a Gemini, or whatever the case may be. When you ask them what they think about Geminis, some people love them. Some people love us, of course, right? You know what I mean? We're lovable people because when you get to know us, or like when we get to know you and we really like you, we are some of the most loyal people on the planet, through thick and thin. Doesn't matter whenever, whatever, we're gonna be there for you, right? We are ride or die for sure. So that is a great, wonderful trait about us Gemini's. The reason why we can be two faced though is because we are masters of the mind in terms of thinking, of thought, right? We have a lot of different interests. We think about things a lot. That is our statement in the zodiac is I think, right? So we run through a lot of thoughts throughout the day, or at least we analyze them very closely because we're wondering, like, why am I thinking this? You know, or we will switch moods a lot because our thoughts are kind of like running rampant. So one of our objectives in this lifetime is to get a hold of our thoughts, get a control of our thoughts, so we can get a control of our emotions. Right? We tend to be pretty emotionally stable, but sometimes we can cause some havoc, right? Especially when we feel like we've been done wrong. But what I'm stating is that we are able to look at things from different perspectives. A great analogy that I have with Gemini is in relation to this Roman god called Janus. This god is depicted as having two faces, one looking the beginning of time and the other looking to the end of time. And that is to say that this particular guy had all knowledge, right? Because if you can see from all the way to the beginning of time to the end of time, there's nothing that you don't know, right? You know everything. So that is the real two face of Gemini. It is not that we betray you, right? Because two face is always associated with betrayal, but it's because we just have so many perspectives. We look at things from different points of view. And it's not necessarily our point of view at times. It's the points of view of other people because we're very observant. We like to look at other people and say, well, what makes that person tick? What would compel that person to do that? And it has to be about what they're thinking because all thoughts precede your actions, right? So even if it's an instinctive act, there had to have been some thought proactively previously about it, right? Or else how would you be able to act upon something that is just not like animal instinct, right? Hunger and being thirsty is not something that you really have to think so much about it beforehand. You just kind of instinctively know as a mammal. We need these things to survive for the most part, right? Some people I know, if you're a breatharian, you just don't want to eat, just want to drink or whatever. It's completely up to you. I'm not knocking you or anything like that. I'm not denying what it is that you do or say, if it's, you know, false or whatever, or true, whatever. I'm not, you know, doing any of that. And really, the whole point about life, and if you understand how the universe operates mechanically, is to not invalidate these things, right? There are people out there that have different beliefs, belief systems, whatnot. Don't invalidate what it is that they believe in, right? Because it's serving them some kind of purpose, even though if it's not serving you kind of purpose, or you feel that it doesn't benefit society. That's really your opinion, and it could be respected as such. But whatever it is that they choose to believe in is their opinion as well, right? And really, the nature of man is to not really seek out the truth. Man only seeks his the facts that reflect upon his opinion, which he will see as the truth. All right. So you don't want to invalidate other people's belief systems or the things that's happening around us, because that's what actually perpetuates these things and keeps them going. That's how the universe operates mechanically, right? So you have things that you can prefer, you don't prefer, which is actually much better to say than this is good and this is bad, right? Especially when you say something is bad, you keep perpetuating it. The analogy I have for that is, let's say you're in a dark room and there's a rubber ball in front of you, and this rubber ball represents things that you think are bad. And so, since you don't want this bad thing, whatever it may be, you toss it, you throw it. But there's a wall that is close by you. So you throw it, it bounces off the wall. It's going to come right back at you. Right. So, for all the things that you say is bad and you don't want, or society shouldn't have, you're perpetuating it by labeling it as such because it's there for a reason. Right. Everything in the universe happens for a reason. All right. I know that sounds cliche, but the universe happens for you, is not happening to you. So when there's something that's occurring in your life that you don't prefer, instead of invalidating it and saying this is bad, I don't want this, look at it from either a neutral point of view or a positive point of view and say, okay, you know what? It's here for a reason. So let me see what the reason is. And so therefore I can learn what it is that I'm supposed to learn from it. And therefore it will dissolve. Right? Because the universe is showing you, hey, there's something here for you to learn. And if you don't learn it, I'm just gonna show it to you again and again and again until you learn from it. And then you acquire what it is that you need to get from it. And then boom, that's it. Example I had, situation I went through last year, 2024, was being in jail. I was in jail for like a really long time. It was only 30 days, but for any person that has been in jail and you have a sane mind, you already know one day in jail is enough for you to know that you don't want to be there. Right. So I knew in that situation that I should not invalidate my experience and say, "Oh no, this is bad. This is terrible." Of course, I had my times where I was like, "Yeah, man, sucks." Right? I had my times like that, but I knew that okay, I had to keep myself in a either neutral state of mind or a positive state of mind, and that okay, what is it that I need to learn from this? And so long I was in that state, there was things that I learned in that position. I actually gained knowledge or learned that, hey, I should do a podcast because I was having conversations with my cellmate, and he was saying, man, you have all this information, this knowledge, and you should start a podcast, man. Share this information with people. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Right. And I was able to read when I was in there. Not like I can't read on the outside, but it forced me to sit down and read. I mean, they had books in there. It's much easier. I mean, it's free. But when I did get access to the library, which was like a little bit more than 2 weeks being in there, I was able to read some books and books that had a lot of great information in it. Things that as I'm reading it, I'm like, I had to see this. And there would probably be no other situation in which I would be able to see this information, right? Because I mean, there's nothing better to do when you're in jail, right? So, the more I looked at it from a neutral point of view, positive point of view, I was able to fortunately get out of that situation, right? Because, it's easy to look back at it and say, oh man, that was a bad experience. But overall, it was an experience that I needed to have at that time in order for me to gain some the experience, the knowledge, and wisdom from that particular situation, right? So there's this saying that goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. That's not exactly true. Or rather, what I would like to do is elaborate on that and offer a more accurate assessment of that adage, where it states that when the student is ready, the student becomes aware, right? Because the teacher is always there. The teacher is the universe. Where's the universe? Where's it go? And all of a sudden you say you're ready. The universe says, okay, I'm here now. No, the universe, life in general, is always here. And everything that is happening on a day to day basis is happening to show you that there's something here for you to learn. You need to learn it in order for you to get to the next step, right? It's like a test. And so if you're not aware of it, you're just, in a sense, you're not even in attendance in the class to take the test, right? Speaking metaphorically. So when you become aware, he's like, oh, this is a test, right? Okay. So now I'm ready for this test, right? Because when you decide to say, okay, I'm not going to say that's bad and turn a blind eye to it, or at least like, just say, oh, this is terrible. You focus on it being terrible. And so therefore, if something's terrible, you're saying it's like, well, there's nothing for me to gain from this, to learn from this. So it's just trash. It's terrible. But if you just look at it neutrally or positively, you say, okay, what is there for me to gain, for me to learn? Oh, okay, here, this is what I learned. Boom, test is done. Once you pass the test, you no longer have to take the test, just like in school, right? You pass the ninth grade, you no longer have to deal with that particular test from the ninth grade. Go on to the 10th grade, right? And so on. But if you just never show up, guess what you have to do? Repeat the ninth grade over, right? If you don't show up for the final exam. So that's exactly how life is, how the universe operates, right? There was another example I wanted to give in terms of good and bad and preferences, why you should start saying things you prefer certain things over others is, let's say for instance, it's a hot summer day, blistering hot. I mean heat wave. But you're out working, you're outside, you're sweating, doing a lot of hard labor, whatever the case may be. You are just drenched in sweat. You are on the verge of dehydration. I hand you a cold glass of water with ice cubes in it, right? Or whatever refreshing beverage that you absolutely love, prefer. You're going to be like, oh man, this is wonderful. This is good. And you're going to drink that cold glass of water, lemonade, or iced tea. Going to be absolutely refreshed and you're going to be feeling good. And you can be like, well, this is good, right? A cold glass of water on a hot summer day is good. But if I give you that same cold glass of water with the ice cubes in it on the coldest of winter days in the blizzard, and you're coming, from outside in the blizzard, you're damn near frostbit all over, about to die from hypothermia. You think that cold glass of water or iced tea or lemonade is still going to be good to you? Absolutely not, right? you would much rather prefer something warm or even hot. Probably you would probably prefer something hot over warm, right? Like a good hot water, hot tea, or hot chocolate, right? Whatever. And you would say that's good. But I took the same object, the cold glass of water, but I put it in two different circumstances, situations, and one circumstance is good, and the other is bad to you, or that's what you perhaps would label it as, right? That applies to everything in life. So just because you have a situation that you don't prefer, don't label that thing as bad because in another situation, that could be quote unquote good. If you're in a traffic jam on your way to work, you may say, "Oh, this is terrible. Can't be late one more time. It's gonna make me late. I'm gonna get fired." And you may think that's the worst thing because you start thinking about, well, I get fired, then I'm gonna have to look for a new job. I got bills to pay. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna put gas in my car? I gotta pay for food. I got my daughters, my son to feed, put diapers on, etc. You're gonna go through all these things, and say, "Oh, this is terrible. This traffic jam sucks. Fuck this traffic jam," right? You may even say all that kind of stuff, right? But you don't know if that traffic jam is there in order to prevent you from getting into an accident that you would have gotten in if that traffic jam wasn't there. Or maybe that traffic jam is there and you show up to work late, you get fired anyway. Maybe it happened because that traffic jam is the universe saying, okay, well, for quite some time, you've been thinking about starting your own business or about working some other job because you really don't like that job, but you do it because it supports you anyway. And so, in order to actually get you up and moving, I have to get you fired by putting a traffic jam in your way. So therefore, you will get the energy, or that will be the catalyst for you to actually get up, start moving to apply to that job that you really want, or to work for yourself, which you really want to do anyway, right? And then from there, you make even more money, become more successful, but you wouldn't have if you wasn't stuck in that traffic jam, which caused you to get fired. But it's the same circumstance. It's just looking at it from a different perspective. But if you invalidate it, you're not going to actually learn what it is that you needed to learn from that. And you will get stuck in the same situation over and over again. You probably would apply to another job, which you don't like, but you just do it because it's going to support you, or you feel it's going to support you for the time being. And then, you keep getting stuck in the same cycle where you just go from job to job, never actually being satisfied or satisfying yourself, right? So, with this podcast, and I want to give a disclaimer, not sure if I gave a disclaimer before, but I'm at least gonna offer different perspectives on things. And like I said, it's just a character that I'm assuming right now is not necessarily reflective of my personal opinions or preferences. Let me say that for all the perspectives that I may offer, but just perspectives of perhaps some of the deviants out there in society, or some of the, thoughts that are commonly associated with a particular topic or subject matter. All right. But, I don't want it to all be controversial. Of course, we're going to run into controversial things, but, we're going to talk about hip hop. We're going to talk about, just music in general. It doesn't have to just only be hip hop, but science and technology, politics, religion, spirituality, all different kinds of topics, all the things that, I'm interested in. I'm not limited on what my interests are. I have interests in a lot of different things. I used to study psychology back in high school. I took abnormal psychology. We studying serial killers, right? That was one of the things I used to study, serial killers, because I was always curious as to the deviance of society. Like, what would cause somebody to want to just kill somebody for absolutely no reason? I was curious as to, like, what was going on in their mind that made them do these kinds of things. And when I studied, serial killers, and studied some of the most gruesome, terrifying serial killers that there were, that would put, Ted Bundy to shame. What was common with all of them, at least 99% of them, is that they all went through trauma when they were young, right? And that particular trauma snapped them, and then this common practice, or let's just say, of serial killers, or a sign that a child is deeply disturbed, is when they kill animals. A lot of them, they do that kind of stuff, right? Because they want to see like what it's like to kill something, and that kind of gives them like a rush. But before that, they go through trauma, right? Their parents didn't care for them, or they were molested, whatever it may have been. They went through some kind of trauma, which caused them to be victims, and then from that, they victimize people, right? So, what that made me realize, and actually, when I got older, I realized this even further, that all people who are assailants or have put people through trauma, they are also victims themselves. They have been traumatized by someone or something, whatever the case may be, but they've gone through particular trauma in their life, and they haven't healed or recovered from it. And so, yeah, we say like, killing is bad, it's terrible, and this kind of thing. And of course, I prefer none of that happening, right? Within me, around me, or whatever the case may be. But it's important that we empathize with them. I know a lot of people is like, "Oh, no, I can't empathize with this person. They're horrendous," or whatever case may be. You don't really know what empathize means. I'm not saying sympathize, I'm saying empathize, okay? Look up what definitions of those words mean, the difference between those 2. But it's important that we empathize with them and not invalidate them, so then we can dissolve the issue with serial killers and these kinds of issues. One thing that I've seen too as well is that, growing up and even to this day, there are certain stereotypes that apply to, so-called white people, so-called black people. I don't really like to use that terminology because, human beings are not crayons. But for the most part, for the people that, who they refer to as white people and who they refer to as black people, there are certain stereotypes that apply to the white people and apply to black people. And I'm not sure if, the same black people are, actually being observant, but the stereotypes that they apply to white people say, oh, only white people do that. Now black people are starting to do those very same things. Why? Because they're saying, oh, well, that's them. That's not us. And they're bad, all this kind of things. And now look what happened. The same people that you criticize, now you're doing the same thing. Not necessarily like you, but like when you observe, you see the just recently there was this man that came home from 15 years in prison, killed his brother and his mother. Isn't that something that you would be like, oh, well, only white people do that? Well, look, and that's not the only case. So I'm not saying like, oh, this is a special circumstance. That's not the only case of, these kinds of things happening where black people, so-called black people, are just killing for absolutely no reason. That these people are off their rocker. There's something going on in their mind that is not right. You know, it's not like you would call it a justified killing. Like this person tried to kill me, so out of defense, I killed them, or if it's over some street politics or whatnot. No, it was just like the person just has something wrong with them, right? So these stereotypes, especially when you label it as a bad stereotype, the people that are stereotyping others, labeling it as, oh, this is bad. Now, they become the same, become exactly the same, you know? So, that's the point, is that you want to start looking at things from a neutral standpoint or a positive standpoint so that we can dissolve these things and we can get to a world of peace, right? Because this is utopia that I can imagine is in the back of your mind, like saying, we could all just be living in peace and we could all be living a particular kind of way, right? Especially if you're Moorish American, I know what you're thinking of how we should be living. Yeah, we can be living like that, but are you still dealing with old beliefs and belief systems? and you're saying, "Oh, this is bad. This is terrible. These people are bad. These people are terrible. They're the devil," and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, in the beginning, I was saying that, but you know what? I decided to step back and not say, I'm not stating that anymore. I definitely don't prefer some of the things that they have been doing. Absolutely, I don't prefer it, but I can empathize with them and I can understand. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense as to why they would do that, right? If you look at the history, right, you would understand, you would understand, like, they do have some kind of resentment and some kind of, it may even be hatred for us, but you can't get rid of hatred with fear, being fearful of that, right? And actually, it confirms what they're doing. They should continue to do it when you show them fear. But when you show them a godly level of courage, which courage is, even if you are dealing with fear, but having the proactiveness to face those fears, right, and walk through them. Because what is fear anyway? False evidence appearing real. That shows them that God does exist, right? And that's for all the people who are atheists or agnostic. Um, you don't have to believe in God to have the feeling of God or to notice the appearance of God. Let me say that. All right. Then we can get more into that another episode. So, you know, if you want to be a co-host, right, and I gotta have some kind of chemistry with you, just can't just be a random person, right? So I have to know you basically. But if you want to be a co-host from time to time, it doesn't have to even be permanent. If you just want to, hop on and be a co-host, right? Because that's just how free this podcast is. Let me know. Or if you want to be a guest, doesn't matter how big or how small you are. If you're a celebrity or you're just some common person, let me know as well. All right. So, we're gonna have a lot of things to talk about on this podcast. I'm definitely interested, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the show. Peace and love. I'm Jasir Bay. Thank you for tuning in. Two Faced Gemini.